Mr. Austin, we welcome you, and a warm welcome to Charlene, your wife of more than 41 years. Now, my wife and I were 61 years. Think you'll make it? All right. We are very happy, Mr. Austin, you'll be introduced now by Senator Sullivan, a member of our committee, Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last time we were together as senators, our capital was under siege. America's authoritarian rivals abroad have been gloating about our disunity. Democracy brings chaos, they tell their people. Better to have a strong hand that keeps order. We live in an imperfect democracy, no doubt. In the American, I am proud and honored to introduce Mr. Lloyd Austin, understands our imperfections more than many. But on closer inspection, the world's dictators have little to celebrate. Congress went back to work on January 6th to count electoral college votes. Tomorrow there will be a transfer of power at the top of our government, as there has been since the founding of our republic. At some point, Chinese and Russian citizens will ask, why can't we do that? Why don't we have strong, resilient institutions that ensure the regular election of new leaders and vest self-government in the people? When these questions are asked, authoritarians like Xi Jinping and Putin won't be gloating anymore because they don't have answers. What does this all have to do with Lloyd Austin? A lot. Mr. Austin has been nominated to lead one of America's most trusted institutions, the Department of Defense. Many of us have worked hard to rebuild our military, but we can all agree that there has been too much turmoil at the top. As its civilian leader, I am confident that Mr. Austin will bring steadiness, leadership, and respect to this indispensable institution. I got to know Mr. Austin in 2005 and 2006, serving together in an Army-heavy combatant command, conducting combat operations throughout the Middle East. We had what might be described today as an uneven power relationship. He was a two-star general, I was a major. He had spent decades on active duty, I was a reservist. He was a soldier, I was a Marine. I was just one of hundreds of field-grade infantry officers recalled to active duty, deployed in the region during a challenging time for our nation. But when I asked for his help, Mr. Austin gave it. When I had a problem, he listened. And when I asked for guidance on an important mission, he provided it. A critical hallmark of exceptional leadership, especially for organizations like the Pentagon, is not just how one treats superiors, but how one treats subordinates. What I saw was respect, integrity, and someone who gets things done in a difficult environment. It is clear to me that the core principles of Mr. Austin's life have been duty, honor, country. That may sound quaint to some, but I think having individuals of impeccable character at the top of our government is more important than ever. Other than integrity, there's no singular requirement for the difficult job of Secretary of Defense. But as the former director of the Joint Staff and CENTCOM commander, Mr. Austin certainly has insights on critical issues such as interagency budget battles, working with our allies, and congressional oversight. Mr. Austin is fully committed to the constitutional principle of civilian control of our military, something that those who serve in uniform. Our recent hearing on this important topic was a bit simplistic, with discussions about so-called military logic versus political logic. So let me play devil's advocate. The very nature of this confirmation hearing is evidence that civilian control of the military is not at risk in America. I believe the related but opposite problem should be of more concern today. No military experience in the top ranks of our government. With the exception of Mr. Austin, no nominee on the incoming Biden national security team has ever served in uniform. With regard to the entire Biden cabinet, only one other nominee has any military experience at all. This is not wise. If confirmed, I'm sure I won't agree with all of Mr. Austin's decisions. But when the inevitable budget battles occur, it will be critical for our nation's security and military members to have a Secretary of Defense who understands firsthand the very real morale and readiness problems that result from drastic cuts to our military. Let me conclude with this. We are living through difficult times, a pandemic, racial tensions, riots, turmoil at the top of the Pentagon, and rising dangers from China, Russia, and Iran. Mr. Austin's confirmation won't solve all these problems, but it will help. He represents the best of America, a man of integrity, humility, and character with a wealth of relevant experience. Our allies will take comfort in his confirmation, and our adversaries will take pause. And as America's first black Secretary of Defense, he will be an inspiration to millions, both in and out of uniform. I urge my colleagues to support his confirmation and the waiver it requires. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan, and I do agree with your comments wholeheartedly, and I believe that we're going to be doing the right thing here. Now we have another introduction by Secretary Panetta, a former Secretary of Defense and a former very close friend of mine. Served together in the House together, and it's nice. It's been too long, Secretary Panetta, and you are recognized for your part of this introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senator Inhofe, I always enjoyed our friendship going back to the House of Representatives. Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of this committee. It's an honor for me to again have the opportunity to appear before this distinguished committee, this time alongside Senator Dan Sullivan, to introduce President-elect Biden's nominee to be the 28th Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. We do meet at a time of great peril for our nation, but it's also a time of great promise. We have endured a harrowing year, dealing with the deadly pandemic, and most recently, the violent attack on our Capitol, this Congress, and our democracy itself. Our adversaries are watching very closely. They're trying to determine whether America will remain the strongest and most resilient democracy the world has ever known. It's also a time of great promise. Tomorrow at this time, our country will have a new president, a man who many of you know personally from his decades of service as a United States Senator, a man whom I've known for over 40 years and had the privilege to work with during my years in the Congress, in the White House, and I was honored to serve him when he was Vice President as CIA Director and Secretary of Defense. Joe Biden is absolutely committed to ensuring that we remain the strongest military power on the face of the earth. He believes that we must have the best trained, best equipped, and most capable fighting force in the world. And he believes that the Department of Defense must be led by someone who not only knows the issues of war and peace, but also knows the heart and soul, the women and men who bravely wear the uniform, put their lives on the line, and fight for our freedom. That's why he selected Lloyd Austin to serve as Secretary of Defense. Lloyd's accomplishments at the Department of Defense are without peer. He graduated from West Point. He led troops at almost every level, commanded in combat, served as America's military commander during the drawdown in Iraq. He served as Vice Chief of Staff of the Army and as commanding general of the U.S. Central Command. And all of you know that that's one of the key combat commands at the Department of Defense. I met Lloyd when I came to DOD as secretary in July of 2011. We had just 6 months to implement the drawdown in Iraq, and Lloyd was the man on the ground charged with getting it done. It was a huge logistical task. He consulted carefully with the president, with the vice president, the national security advisor, his colleagues at the State Department, and those in the intelligence community. And he carried out with diligence and professionalism the plan that was set forth by me and other civilian leaders at the Pentagon. He had to negotiate with the Iraqis, who were not easy to negotiate with at that time, and ensured that our troops and all of their equipment could redeploy safely while protecting America's core national security interests. I mentioned this episode because I know that many of you are wondering whether a former general officer can uphold the principle of civilian control of the military. I've spoken to Lloyd, and there is no doubt in my mind that he will uphold the principle of civilian control. And frankly, the best military officers that I had the honor to serve with are those who understand the importance of civilian control. And Lloyd was one of those. He will respect the civilian chain of command, enshrined not only in tradition, but in law. He will ensure there is transparency and accountability at the Pentagon. He'll make himself and department leaders available to this committee and to the Congress for oversight. And he'll provide regular briefings to the American people. He will support the appointment of civilian leaders across the office of the Secretary and the department. He knows that while we cannot defend our nation without our armed forces, we cannot defend our democratic form of government without strong civilian stewardship of our national security. Lloyd Austin is a man of uncommon character and decency and courage. He's a trailblazer, feared by our enemies and admired by those that he led. He was the first African-American general officer to lead the Army Corps in combat. He was the first African-American to command an entire theater of war. And if confirmed, he will be the first African-American to lead the Department of Defense. In sum, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I believe that Lloyd Austin is the right person at the right time, man that we need at this moment to lead the Department of Defense. He's clear-eyed about the threats, and we know there are a number of threats we're dealing with abroad: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, cyber attackers, and terrorists. He understands the value of alliances, keeping them strong, supporting them. And he's prepared to shoulder the awesome burden of sending our best men and women in uniform, if necessary, into harm's way, the most difficult task we, who've been Secretary of Defense, had to assume. As Americans watched the tragic images from the Capitol Rotunda on January 6th, I was reminded of one painting in that space that has always represented for me the ideal of service to country. That's the oil painting of George Washington resigning his commission as general in the Army so that he could assume the duties of being the nation's first president. It's a statement about our democratic form of government that has stood the test of time in that hallowed citadel of liberty. The tradition of military leaders from Washington, Eisenhower, Marshall, to the large number of veterans who are serving in Congress today, including my own son, of taking off our uniforms, returning to civilian life, to lead and to serve again. That tradition is as old as our republic itself and essential to the quality of leadership we need in order to protect our Constitution and our national security. I am absolutely confident that Lloyd Austin will follow in that tradition. I'm honored to introduce him to the committee and urge his swift confirmation.
Thank you, Secretary Panetta. It's great to be with you again after all these years, and you haven't lost a thing. Okay, Mr. Austin, we have our first 7 questions, and you know what they are, so you're ready to answer them, but answer them audibly if you would. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflict of interest?
I have.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record in hearings?
I will.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
They will.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
I do.
And do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communication, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
I do.
And have you assumed any duties or undertaking any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
I have not.
Thank you very much. As Secretary Panetta clearly stated, we don't have there's not a time in the past that we've had more threats than we're facing today. And throughout my tenure as chairman, this committee is focused on ensuring that the DOD's authorities and resources it needs to implement the National Defense Strategy. This document is a document that means a lot to all of us here. It's been our blueprint we've used since 2018. It's put together by 6 knowledgeable Democrats, 6 knowledgeable Republicans, and it's served as our blueprint. And I would assume that you would continue to do that. As the Secretary of Defense, second in chain of command, you'd be responsible and accountable to the President of the United States and to the American people for implementing this strategy. I look forward to learning how you will drive military readiness for the strategic competition with China and Russia, which we've talked about at length here. How you will also handle some of the provocations from rogue nations like Iran and North Korea. Even worse is that our military's technology advantage has eroded. We're used to the old days when we had the best of everything, and that's not true anymore. We fell down a little bit. I know that between the years of 2010 and 2015, we were dropping our defense in terms of dollars down by about 25%, while China was increasing theirs, Mr. Austin, by 83%, and that's not acceptable. The nation and the Department of Defense is going to tackle this problem head-on if we hope to preserve and defend our way of life from those who would do harm to us. Now, if confirmed, you would have the honor of leading a team of Americans who represent everything that is noble and best for our nation, our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, Marines, Space Guardians, our military families. And by the way, on the military families, we always hear from those who are a little less enthusiastic about a strong national defense that we spend more than Russia and China put together. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is we care about the families. We care about housing. We care about the largest single expense that we have in military is for our families, our military families. Now, in a communist country, you don't have that. They just give you a gun and said, go out and shoot people. So that's what we are concerned about, and we will continue to do that. Our many defense civil servants also sacrifice day in and day out for our national security and rarely get credit for they deserve. The department will require strong civilian leadership. For you to serve as the Secretary of Defense, Congress must provide an exception to the law that prohibits individuals from being appointed if they are within 7 years of their military service. Last week, this committee held a hearing on civilian control of the armed services, which I think it was instructive. I've never been all that concerned about the 7 years, but others have. I hope that you will share with the committee what actions you will take to ensure your tenure reflects and protects the principle of civilian control of the military if you are confirmed. We look forward to hearing your views on these and other important issues. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I join you in welcoming Lloyd Austin to today's hearing. General, I want to thank you for your 4 decades of military service to our country, and I appreciate your willingness to return to public service, this time in a civilian capacity. In addition, I want to welcome your wife, Charlene. I also want to recognize and thank former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta, who spoke on your behalf, and in addition, Senator Sullivan for their introductions. Today's hearing is also very different from previous Secretary of Defense nomination hearings. Due to recent security threats, the Acting Secretary of Defense has authorized the deployment of 25,000 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. I never thought I would see such a large display of U.S. military force on the streets of our country. I thank the service members and the other federal agencies for ensuring that the U.S. Capitol and the inauguration is safe and secure. In addition, the world continues to be engulfed in a global pandemic that has caused hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United States and sickened millions more. This has not only affected the way we conduct our hearings, but it's become the paramount issue facing the new administration, including the Department of Defense. General Austin, you have a long and distinguished career. You have served at the highest echelons of the Army and capped your service as the commander of U.S. Central Command. If confirmed as the next Secretary of Defense, you will face a daunting array of current and emerging security threats. U.S. strategic priorities have shifted in recent years, as reflected in the 2018 National Defense Strategy, to focus increasingly on the near-peer competition with China and Russia. At the same time, the Trump administration, through its disruptive behavior, has eroded faith in U.S. global leadership with adverse strategic consequences. Indeed, our national defense strategy must be a component of an overall national security strategy that embraces all aspects of soft power as well as military power. As a former commander of U.S. Central Command, you have valuable experience to addressing security threats in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and elsewhere in the CENTCOM area of operations. The incoming Biden administration faces an immediate challenge with respect to Iran's growing nuclear, ballistic missile, and proxy capabilities. The Department of Defense will play a key role in deterring these threats while supporting diplomatic efforts. In Iraq and Syria, while the physical ISIS caliphate has been defeated, the underlying factors that gave rise to ISIS and al-Qaeda remain largely unaddressed. Defending against transnational violence, extremist groups will require continued vigilance. In Afghanistan, our allies and partners need to be reassured that going forward, they will be consulted up front on any changes in U.S. force posture. The incoming administration will need to assess the conditions on the ground, including whether the Taliban is in fact living up to their commitments and what level of support is required to protect U.S. national security interests and invigorate a diplomatic solution. In addition to these broad strategic challenges, as Secretary of Defense, you must also grapple with issues specific to the management of the department. The fiscal year 2022 budget will be the first that is unconstrained by the Budget Control Act, and some view this as an opportunity to redirect the overall defense budget. This year will mark an inflection point in how the department prioritizes resources it needs to accomplish its missions. The department must focus its efforts on critical technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, and cybersecurity, while also emphasizing rapid delivery of advanced new weapon systems on timelines that keep pace with technological change. The Department of Defense must partner with Congress to find ways to retire legacy systems without incurring too much risk operationally or economically. The department also has management challenges that require investment in great people to manage the complexities of the Pentagon and its processes, rather than an endless search for budget cuts and workforce reductions. Ensuring robust funding for full-spectrum readiness, including additional home station training, flying hours, steaming days, depot maintenance, and installation sustainment, has been a high priority for this committee, and I expect it will be yours too. The department must also hold private housing companies and their defense chain of command accountable to ensure families live in the homes they deserve. Our men and women in uniform and the civilian workforce that supports them remain this committee's top concern, and they must be yours as well. Recruiting and retaining a sufficiently sized, trained, and equipped military of the necessary quality of character and talent to meet national defense requirements is always a paramount goal of the Secretary of Defense and this committee. Successful recruiting and ensuring the health of the force has been and will continue to be a challenge while we finish the national fight against COVID. General Austin, as I have recounted in great detail, if confirmed, you will manage the department coping with many extraordinarily difficult issues. It will require strong civilian leadership to address these challenges and to reverse the erosion of civil-military relations over the past several years. However, in order to serve as the Secretary of Defense, Congress must provide an exception to the statutory requirement that prohibits individuals from being appointed if they are within 7 years of their military service. Last week, this committee heard from expert witnesses on the state of civilian control of the armed forces. Some members expressed concern that providing an exception for you to serve as the Secretary of Defense, particularly so soon after Secretary Mattis, could harm civil-military relations. It is a valid concern, but as our witnesses testified, it is possible to mitigate the effects if you demonstrate your commitment to empowering civilians in the department. Further, we must also hear how you view the role of Secretary of Defense and how that position is different from your days of honorable service as a military officer. This distinction is critical, as the Secretary of Defense is an inherently political position requiring a skill set for managing a vast bureaucracy while balancing personalities within the department and across our federal agencies. Relatedly, an effective secretary must be transparent with Congress. Tensions often exist between the executive and legislative branches, regardless of political party. However, the department must keep Congress fully informed on critical national security developments so that we can conduct congressional oversight. General Austin, with these broad categories in mind, I hope you will candidly share what actions you will take to ensure your tenure reflects and protects the principle of civilian control of the military. Finally, strengthening civil-military relations is not the sole responsibility of the Secretary of Defense. Congress has a role too. This includes expeditiously confirming qualified civilian nominees to serve in the Pentagon. Furthermore, I believe Congress should revisit the headquarters reductions implemented over the past several years. While well-intentioned, these budget cuts have sapped the Department of experience, expertise, and institutional knowledge, all of which degrades the department's ability to oversee the critical policy issues that are integral for robust civilian oversight. Again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to hearing from our nominee.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Excellent, excellent statement. With some senators attending remotely, I want to let everyone know how we're going to run this thing. Since it's impossible to know exactly when our colleagues who will be joining via computer We will not follow our standard early bird timing rule. Instead, we'll handle the order of questions by seniority, alternating between sides, Democrat and Republican, until we have gone through everyone. Then we'll see how much time we have left and what the wish is. We will do the standard, instead of doing the standard 5 minutes, Senator Reid and I have agreed that 7-minute rounds might be more appropriate. And I ask my colleagues on the computers to please keep an eye on the clock, which you should see on your screens. And we'll try to adhere to those 7-minute rounds. Finally, to allow for everyone to be heard, whether in the room or on a computer, I ask all colleagues to please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Mr. Austin, we'll begin with your opening statement, and be assured that the entirety of your written statement will be made a part of the record. General Austin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Reid, and members of this committee. I'm grateful for your time this afternoon, especially during these momentous days. It was apparent to me and to all Americans 2 weeks ago how seriously you take your duties to the Constitution, and I thank you for that commitment. I know that you share my gratitude for the commitment of the men and women of the Department of Defense as well, who share your devotion to that founding document, our Constitution. Many of them are serving overseas. Some of them are serving just outside this room. And all of them are keeping us safe. We owe much to their selflessness and to that of their families. I want to thank Senator Sullivan and Secretary Panetta for their kind words of introduction. I am truly grateful. And of course, I want to thank my wonderful wife, Charlene, who, like today, has stood by my side for more than 40 years, guiding me, supporting me, and making me a better man. I'm also very grateful to President-elect Biden for asking me to serve my country again. I value the strength of my relationship with him, and I am humbled by the trust and confidence that he has placed in me. And I hope this hearing will earn me your trust. Let me say at the outset that I understand and respect the reservations that some of you have expressed about having another recently retired general at the head of the Department of Defense. The safety and security of our democracy demands competent civilian control of our armed forces, the subordination of military power to the civil. I spent my entire life committed to that principle. In war and in peace, I implemented the policies of civilians elected and appointed over me, leaders like Secretary Panetta. And I know that being a member of the President's cabinet, a political appointee, requires a different perspective and unique duties from a career in uniform. I intend to surround myself with and empower experienced, capable civilian leaders who will enable healthy civil-military relations grounded in meaningful oversight. Indeed, I plan to include the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in top decision-making meetings, ensuring strategic and operational decisions are informed by policy. I will rebalance collaboration and coordination between the Joint Staff and the OSD staff to ensure civilian input is integrated at every level of the process. And I will make clear my expectation that the Pentagon work hand in glove with the State Department, supporting the work of our diplomats. Now, I know that a large measure of civilian control of our military lies right here with this body. And if you confirm me, I assure you that the Pentagon under my leadership will respect your oversight responsibilities, and we will be transparent with you. And I will provide you my best counsel, and I will seek yours. And just like you, I will take seriously the many challenges facing our country, the most immediate of which, in my view, is the pandemic. And if confirmed, I will quickly review the department's contributions to coronavirus relief efforts, ensuring that we're doing everything that we can to help distribute vaccines across the country and to vaccinate our troops and preserve readiness. We'll also do everything we can for our military families. They too are educating kids at home and losing their jobs, and trying to stock the pantry. I know this committee shares my view that we owe them our best efforts to lighten that load. We also owe our people a working environment free of discrimination, hate, and harassment. And if confirmed, I will fight hard to stamp out sexual assault and to rid our ranks of racists and extremists, and to create a climate where everyone fit and willing has the opportunity to serve this country with dignity. The job of the Department of Defense is to keep America safe from our enemies. But we can't do that if some of those enemies lie within our own ranks. For those enemies and adversaries outside the ranks and around the world, we need resources to match strategy, and strategy matched to policy, and policy matched to the will of the American people. Globally, I understand that Asia must be the focus of our effort. And I see China in particular as a pacing challenge for the department. And I know I'll need your help in tackling these problems and to give our men and women in uniform the tools that they need to fight and win. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, while I did not seek this job, I consider it an honor. And if confirmed, I will carry out the mission of the Department of Defense, always with the goal to deter war and ensure our nation's security. And I will uphold the principle of civilian control of the military as intended. And I would not be here asking for your support if I felt that I was unable or unwilling to question people with whom I once served in operations that I once led, or too afraid to speak my mind to you or to the President. I was a general and a soldier, and I'm proud of that. But today I appear before you as a citizen, the son of a postal worker and a homemaker from Thomasville, Georgia, and I'm proud of that too. And if you confirm me, I am prepared to serve now as a civilian, fully acknowledging the importance of this distinction. And I thank you again for consideration of my nomination and for your steadfast support of our men and women in uniform, our civilians, and their families, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, General Austin. Great statement. You heard my comments, General Austin, about the document, the National Defense Strategy. You're familiar with this. I'm sure you've read it many times. What do you think about its relevance today? Have you seen changes that should be made in this, or what's your feeling today contemporarily about this statement?
I think much of the document is absolutely on track for today's challenges, Mr. Chairman. As is the case with all strategies, if confirmed, one of the things that I would look to do is to work to update the strategy and work within the confines of the guidance and the policy issued by the next administration.
Yeah, well, that's right, and the guidance also from this document, I think is still relevant today. In this document, the previous two Secretaries of Defense, Secretary Mattis, Secretary Esper, both agreed that that document it prescribed that we'd probably need a 3 to 5% real growth in defense budget effectively in the coming years. Do you agree generally with that statement?
Well, Mr. Chairman, as I said in the opening statement, I believe that our resources need to match our strategy, and our strategy needs to match our policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume that would be yes. And others were going to be asking about the civilian and military relations. I know that, but let me cover a couple of things that I think are important. On the nuclear triad, a lot of people who have different ideas on what we should do and the priorities we have in our defense system, they try to whittle away at the nuclear triad. And we have always felt, in the Secretaries of Defense, that nuclear deterrence is, do you agree with them that their assessment that nuclear deterrence is the DOD's highest priority mission?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
And do you agree that the triad, the land, air, and sea-based nuclear delivery platforms are still necessary, even though we do hear a lot of arguments that 2 of the 3 would be adequate? What do you think?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the triad has served us well in the past, and I certainly believe that it will continue to do so going forward. And I personally support the triad.
Good. We've had kind of a forgotten continent for a long period of time in Africa. I can remember when Africa was in 3 different commands. It was in the PACOM, the Central Command, and the EUCOM. And we came along with AFRICOM, and I think things have really improved since that time. And I think it's a critical theater for implementing this national defense strategy that we have. We see China all over. People talk about the South China Sea, about their building of the islands and all these things that are going on, but they forget that China has, for the first time, left their city limits to support a major objective on their behalf, and that's in Djibouti. And they go not just in Djibouti, but all throughout China, as far south as the southern part of Tanzania, and so it's very active in that area. I would ask you, right now we have some 6,000 DoD personnel on the continent. I know there's an effort in this last administration to be reducing in some areas what our presence, what our resources, how they should be put out. My feeling was that we had inadequate resources to start with only 6,000 in the entire continent. Do you have any thoughts that you've given to that in terms of the resources that we need to use in that part of the world?
Mr. Chairman, Africa, like some other places in the world, has been one of those places where we've been able to gain good effect with a small amount of investment by helping our partners to increase their ability to defend their sovereign territory and to protect themselves.
That's excellent. We have to keep in mind that many of our closest allies are there right now, and if we should deteriorate our presence in any way, we would, I have a feeling they'd do the same thing. So I appreciate that very much. One last thing I want to touch on, because it is a current issue. Ever since the International Court of Justice ruled way back in 1975, I believe it was, that we have in Western Sahara, we supported a referendum for self-determination. Now, the United States has done that ever since the 1970s. The UN has done that since the 1970s. The African Union has done that, and most all of the 52 nations of Africa have all stated that the Western Sahara should have a referendum for self-determination. What do you think?
Well, that's an issue that I certainly would want to take a closer look at, Mr. Chairman, before I gave you a detailed answer. But it's one of the things that I'll look at, if confirmed, right away going into the position.
Yeah, and I'd like to have you keep in mind that they have been consistent for so many years now. And so I would anticipate that your feelings would be the same. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Austin. One issue that is obvious is the discussion of the erosion of civilian control, participation, influence on the Department of Defense. That was highlighted by the National Defense Security document, which the chairman has displayed. But the suggestion there was it was not something that was happening in an instant, that it was taking place over years. And part of that, I believe, is the lack of competent civilian authorities in place. There are many individuals, as I suggested in my statement, that are acting. There are others who are civil servants who have been pushed up into jobs that normally require confirmation, and there's been a lack of sometimes candidates for confirmation. So I would ask you, if you are confirmed, will you do your utmost to ensure that every position, civilian position in the department is filled, that we get nominees promptly? I know you have to work through the White House, and that other individuals will be put in positions where they are both skilled and qualified.
Absolutely, Senator Reid. I will do everything I can to move as quickly as I can to move to fill those positions with experienced and competent, qualified civilians. And I will need the help of this body to make sure that that we're moving quickly.
Yeah, I concur. This has to be a collaborative effort. I think in addition to that, with the civilian employee members, and as you suggest in your remarks, you have to ensure that there's a very appropriate working relationship with uniformed personnel, particularly in the Joint Staff. And from your comments, I assume that'll be one of your priorities, to make sure that, and indeed that the civilians have a critical role in that process. Is that correct?
It's absolutely correct, Senator Reid. I think it's imperative that the OSD staff maintain primacy in terms of crafting strategy and policy, and I think we'll need the right civilians in key positions to help us do that, and we've already begun to move down that road. You've seen Colin Call nominated to be the Undersecretary for Policy, very talented young man that will do well. You've seen Kath Hicks nominated to be the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So we're off to a good start, and we'll continue to maintain momentum in filling those positions and making sure that we rebalance the workload between the Joint Staff and the Secretariat.
Thank you. On another subject, the need for strengthened alliances seems to be obvious, but something that you're going to have to take on immediately. I'm thinking of the Pacific Defense Initiative, which the chairman was the principal author, and it's based on solidifying our relationships, both the diplomatic and operationally, with our near partners in the Pacific, the Australians, the Japanese, and the South Korea, and then building further with other Pacific nations. And I would presume and hope that you would see that as an important task also, building up our relationships and alliances, which in many respects have been neglected. Is that something that you see as important?
I think it's critical, Senator Reid, and I also very much look forward to going out and refurbishing those alliances and making sure that we build additional capacity where possible. And you can look to when we do begin to travel again, that that region will be one of my first stops.
Right. Yeah, there's the old saying, there's strength in numbers, and I think there's some truth to that. So as we build up our, not just in a superficial way, but training together, conducting exercises together, integrating our intelligence, integrating our operations at sea, on land, and in the air, that I think it could be the best deterrent we could think of with respect to the aspirations of China. And I think you might concur.
I agree.
One of the tasks you're going to have is, as you're trying to deal with all these crises around the world, you also have to transform the Department of Defense. As the chairman indicated, our technological advantage, which was, we thought, uncontested in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, et cetera, is contested. In fact, there are suggestions that we might not be ahead in many places. And so you're going to have to think very seriously about how do we elevate science, how do we, more importantly, take our scientific developments, our prototypes, and get it to the field, to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines in the field. And if any comments on that, I'd appreciate it.
I certainly agree with you, Senator Reid, that our acquisition system needs to be more agile and more responsive to the needs that you just mentioned. We need to get the capability down to the to the people who need it, the people who are going to use it as quickly as possible. I'd also say that we need to develop the operational concepts that support those new capabilities to make sure that we continue to present a credible deterrent. But I absolutely agree that there's much to be done in terms of working with the acquisition process to make sure that it becomes more agile.
Well, thank you. And just as a final point, I think I have to respond to the challenge that the chairman gave you to reach your 61st wedding anniversary. Having been married for the first time at the age of 55, despite my best efforts, I can guarantee the chairman I will not reach 61 years. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I don't believe that. Senator Wicker.
Senator Reid, you just do it one day at a time.
Thank you. Good advice, Senator Wood.
Mr. Austin, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for the conversation that we had several weeks ago over the phone. And thank you for your willingness to serve in the military and now to serve in a civilian capacity. You're a West Point graduate. I pointed out to Senator Reid that I'm wearing an Army tie today in your honor, but I suppose also in honor of Senator Reid and all the distinguished Army folks. I'm an Air Force veteran myself, but I'm also a former chair of the Sea Power Subcommittee, and so today I want to talk to you at the beginning about Sea Power. The 30-year shipbuilding plan was finally released just last month by the leadership in the Navy. And it calls for 405 manned ships by the year 2051. That's compared to a 355 ship requirement that we previously had and that we actually placed into the statute. Have you read the 30-year shipbuilding plan, Mr. Austin?
I've not read the 30-year plan yet, Senator Wicker.
Are you familiar with the fact that the 30-year shipbuilding plan calls for increasing our requirement? Actually, it increases our requirement from 355 ships to 405 manned ships by the year 2051.
I am familiar with that fact.
Do you support that finding?
Well, I certainly, I would just say, Senator, our Navy is the most capable naval force on the face of the planet. It will remain so if I'm confirmed and become Secretary of Defense. I think that it's important that we maintain the capabilities that we'll need to be relevant not only today, but relevant tomorrow. So I look forward to getting on the ground and, if confirmed, and working with the leadership of the Navy to better understand, the requirements and how we're going to support those requirements. And also, I look forward to working with this body to make sure that we have the right resources to support that requirement.
Well, that does bring me to a point that I need to make, and that is that within the administration, it's not only the White House and it's not only DOD, but also OMB is a mighty big gorilla sitting in the room there, and they force a lot of constraints upon us. Let me just say to you that I hope you will soon become familiar with this shipbuilding plan and be able to give us a more definite answer about the need for an increased Navy to do the things that we have to do. It calls for adding 82 new ships between 2022 and 2026 at a cost of $147 billion. Previously, that number was only 44 ships. So the new requirement, the new plan is 82 new ships in that short 4-year period rather than 44 ships, and an extra $45 billion over that time frame. So rest assured that we need to have more conversations there. The distinguished chairman mentioned China, the fact that their ambitions not only are in the Pacific, but also extend to Africa, and he named a few locations there. The DOD report to Congress on China recently said it is likely China will aim to develop a military by mid-century that is equal to, or in some cases superior to, the U.S. military. Do you agree with that assessment, Mr. Austin?
I would agree. I would agree that that's their goal. My job, if confirmed as Secretary of Defense, is to make sure that we develop the capabilities, the plans, and the operational concepts to ensure that we maintain a competitive edge. And so that, while that may be their goal, I would, again, if I'm confirmed, would intend to make sure that that never happens.
Well, it's my contention that the new shipbuilding plan calling for 405 manned ships by the year 2051 and additional 82 new ships in the next 5 years is part and parcel to answering that challenge. What do you say to that, Mr. Austin?
I certainly say that we need to have the right kinds of capability to be able to counter the emerging threat. And again, I look forward to having that conversation with the Department of the Navy. If that's the analysis that's been provided by the Navy, I have every reason to believe that it's accurate. But I really would like to have that conversation in more depth.
Let me quote another Army man, a distinguished chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, who said just last month, quote, "Look, I'm an Army guy and I love the Army, but the fundamental defense of the United States and the ability to project power forward will always be for America, naval and airspace power." I would just commend to you that statement and suggest that the additional sea power is going to be necessary. I would also want you to comment, and I'll just ask you because we're time constrained, to comment about the idea of basing 2 additional destroyers at Rota, Spain, to be there to combat Russian aggression. But, Mr. Chairman, because I only have 2 seconds, I'll take that for the record. Thank you, Mr. Austin.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Austin, thank you for being willing to be considered for this important post at this critical time in our nation's history. As you're probably aware, last week this committee received testimony from outside experts on the issue of the waiver that will be required for you to serve and the whole issue of civil-military relations. And I know you addressed that briefly in your opening comments, and Senator Reid followed up with some specific questions. But one of the interesting things to me in that hearing last week was one of the people testifying talked about the concern that during Secretary Mattis's tenure that there was an over-deference to military views that were critical to shaping America's military policy or defense policy. Can you talk about how you would respond to those concerns and what you think should be done to ensure that the balance continues with the prominence being on civilian control of the military?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I believe that you need to have the right people in the right positions that can be that are in the decision-making process. And so, I'd look to have a very experienced Undersecretary for Policy. I'd look to have a very experienced Deputy Secretary of Defense. My Chief of Staff will not, if I'm confirmed, will not be a military person, but yet a person that really understands strategy and policy and also has deep ties to the Hill as well as to the White House. And so I think the people in the room and contributing to the decision making, it makes all the difference in the world. So to answer your question, I will make sure that we staff the positions with the right people who have the right experiences and who are not afraid to provide their input, and I will empower them to make sure that they have the flexibility to get the job done, to coordinate with the Joint Staff and coordinate with other agencies to ensure that we have a policy, significant policy input on every decision.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, especially the importance of the empowerment of those individuals. When we talked shortly after your nomination was put forward, we talked about two of New Hampshire's military installations that we are very proud of, the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which is shared between New Hampshire and Maine, and also our 157th Air Refueling Wing at Pease National Guard, which was the first Air National Guard base to receive the new KC-46 refueling tanker. And there are two long-term concerns that I have about those installations. One is the shipyard optimization plan as we look at the need to invest in our public shipyards in the future. That optimization plan is going to be critical to ensuring that the capacity is there, not just at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, but our other public shipyards to support our naval fleet. And I hope that you will remain committed to that plan and to moving forward with that plan as we look at the upcoming years.
I will, Senator.
And the other is the KC-46 and the continuing issues with getting that tanker online. As you know, the most recent one is the remote vision system, which still is not fixed in a way that allows those tankers to fly and do the refueling mission that is so critical. Again, I would hope that you will stay on that issue with Boeing and make sure we get those planes right so that they can do the refueling that we're paying for them to do.
I will absolutely stay on this issue. I think it's critical. It's a critical component of our overall force, and so I think it's important that we continue to press and get this capability to where it needs to be.
Great, and I hope you will come up to New Hampshire and visit both of those installations at some point in your tenure, if confirmed. I would like to ask you about Afghanistan next, because as we look at where we are in Afghanistan, the treaty or the agreement, I don't know what we want to call it, because clearly the Taliban is not complying with what have been announced as concessions that were made as part of that agreement. Also, the failure of that agreement to take into consideration the role of women and minorities in Afghanistan that have been so important as they have written a new constitution. And as we look at ending conflict there, one of the things we know from the data is that when women are at the table in negotiations, that there's a 35% better chance that those peace agreements will last 15 years or longer. So this isn't just for the optics. It looks great to have women at the table. It's about how do we ensure that those negotiations are long-lasting. And I wonder if you can talk about what you would like to see at this point in Afghanistan as we think about how do we withdraw there in a way that leaves a country that enshrines some of the changes that have been made to support a new constitution and all of the effort that's been put in there by the United States and so many other countries in the world.
Well, Senator, I certainly would like to see this conflict end with a negotiated settlement. And I think we're going to make every effort that we can to ensure that that happens. I would also like to say, up front, I am truly grateful for the sacrifices of the thousands of men and women that have gone through Afghanistan and given so much, sacrificed so much. To your point, their work has made a difference. But I think this conflict needs to come to an end, and we need to see an agreement reached, and in accordance with what the president-elect wants to see, I think we want to see an Afghanistan in the future that does not present a threat to America. So
Absolutely.
a focus on some counterterrorism issues, I think in the future, I think would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen, and via WebEx, Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, General Austin. This committee has consistently heard testimony, including from every STRATCOM commander who has appeared before this committee since I've been a member, recommending against making unilateral reductions to our nuclear forces. Do you agree that making unilateral reductions is unwise?
Senator, I'm having a tough time.
Yeah, the volume seems not to be high enough. If anyone knows how to adjust that, this is a good time to do it.
Let me see if I do.
That sounds better.
Do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I was asking, sir, about making unilateral reductions to our nuclear forces. Do you agree that making these reductions unilaterally is unwise?
I think that we should, I look forward to getting on board if confirmed and having an ability to kind of look under the hood and see exactly what we're doing with our nuclear forces. So once I've had a chance to do that, Senator, I would love to come back and discuss it with you.
In your answer to some questions that were sent over to you, you said that, I believe it is in the national security interests of the United States and its allies and partners to pursue formal, verifiable arms control agreements that reduce the nuclear threats from Russia and China. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
So reductions should be made through negotiated, verifiable agreements, not unilaterally. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, sir. Another fact that has been consistently emphasized by civilian officials and military leaders in both the Obama and Trump administrations is that nuclear modernization cannot be delayed any further. Speaking in 2016, President Obama's Secretary of Defense Ash Carter put it in the following way. The fact is, most of our nuclear weapon delivery systems have already been extended decades beyond their original expected service lives. So it's not a choice between replacing these platforms or keeping them. It's really a choice between replacing them or losing them. That would mean losing confidence in our ability to deter, which we can't afford in today's volatile security environment. More recently, Admiral Richard, the current STRATCOM commander, in his posture statement last year, testified that, quote, many of the modernization and sustainment efforts necessary to ensure that deterrence viability have zero schedule margin and are late to need, end quote. He went on to state, we cannot afford more delays and uncertainty in delivering capabilities and must maintain a focus on revitalizing our nuclear forces and the associated infrastructure. General, is this also your understanding of the modernization schedule?
Well, I misunderstood your first part of the question there when you started out. What I wanted to tell you was I really look forward to getting into the details of the nuclear modernization program, if confirmed. And, I really would like to be able to look at the details of exactly what we're choosing to invest in and the timelines associated with that. And I would love to come back to you and discuss that with you.
I would have your assurance, though, that you would, of course, be visiting with the current STRATCOM combatant commander as well as previous ones about the need to make sure that we have these platforms that we need.
That will be a top priority, Senator.
I guess I'm kind of surprised by your answer, General. When the chairman asked you about the triad specifically, about maintaining an effective nuclear triad of land, air, and sea-based platforms, I thought your answer was yes, we have to maintain that effective nuclear triad. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
And I realize that you do have to review where we currently are in modernization, but I would think having an understanding that every administration and every STRATCOM commander and also our secretaries of defense have been adamant that we cannot fall behind on this. Your answer that you would have to get back on me is somewhat surprising. I understand it's a complicated topic, but it is a 60-year-old foundational concept that we have here.
Yes, Senator, and I think that we're in agreement that this is a priority. This needs to remain a priority. What I was just conveying was the specific timelines of which pieces are being resourced at what rate. Those things I would really like to get into details and have a further discussion with you on. But there's no question that I consider this to be a priority, and it will remain a priority. And I look forward to getting with the STRATCOM commander and having that discussion in detail.
Well, thank you. I hope also if you are confirmed, you will be a strong advocate for the National Nuclear Security Administration being able to receive sufficient funding so that they can meet the Department of Defense's needs.
I will be.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Now via WebEx, Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Austin, President-elect Biden made overturning President Trump's ban on open transgender military service a day one priority. Can you confirm your commitment and tell the committee how you plan to reinstate open service?
I support the president's plan or plan to overturn the ban. I truly believe, Senator, that, as I said in my opening statement, that if you're fit and you're qualified to serve and you can maintain the standards, you should be allowed to serve. And you can expect that, that I will support that throughout.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. When we met together, we talked at length about the scourge of military sexual assault in the military. We talked about how this has been an issue for decades. And in fact, we talked about all the efforts that the Department of Defense has made over at least the last decade that I've been on the Armed Services Committee to try to eradicate it. Every Secretary of Defense from the last 25 years has said there is a zero tolerance for sexual assault in the military. But every time they say there's zero tolerance, we look at the facts, we look at the evidence, we look at how many sexual assaults are committed, how many go to trial, how many end in conviction, and we don't seem to improve at all. In fact, last year, the Department of Defense announced a record number of sexual assaults reported by or against service members and the lowest conviction rate for their assailants on record. In your opinion, does this reflect good order and discipline within the military? Does this reflect enhanced military readiness?
Senator, I take the issue of sexual assault seriously and personally. And to your point, Senator, I think we put a lot of effort into this, and I'm grateful for all of the effort that you have personally put into this and this committee has put into this, but we have not gotten better, and we have to get better, and we will get better. We have to go after the culture, we have to go after the climate. This is a leadership issue, it's a readiness issue. And it starts from the top, and we got to work from the bottom as well, simultaneously.
So therefore, is your answer yes, that it does not reflect good order and discipline and does not reflect the readiness that you would like your service to have?
That's correct, Senator.
Furthermore, the most recent Pentagon survey on the topic found that 64% of sexual assault survivors who reported their crime perceived some form of retaliation for reporting that crime, often from the exact chain of command that's supposed to protect them. This number is statistically unchanged from 2016. Does this suggest to you adequate progress on what the top brass has promised to do year after year? Do you believe that this is sufficient progress?
I absolutely do not believe that it's progress, Senator.
Well, given the total lack of progress or accountability within the military justice system, do you believe that a new approach must be taken? Because as we discussed the recent events at Fort Hood, a new approach is clearly warranted. What is your view on that?
I certainly believe that we need to do better, a lot of things better in terms of investigation and prosecutions. And I think we have to look at this holistically. And I know that you know that President-elect has committed to standing up a 90-day commission to really look at this soup to nuts. And I look forward to the readout of that commission, but I won't wait for 90 days to get after this. As I indicated, this starts with me, and you can count on me getting after this on day one.
Well, to be honest, President-elect Biden said much more than that. He promised much more than a commission. He said, in fact, when asked directly by Protect Our Defenders Nancy Parrish if he would support, quote, moving the military justice system into the 21st century by allowing military prosecutors to make prosecution decisions for non-military crimes, serious felonies like rape, murder, and child abuse, end of quote. And that President-elect Biden in response said, quote, yes, 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 end of quote. So do you share President-elect Biden's commitment to move prosecutorial decisions outside the chain of command and giving that decision to trained military prosecutors?
I would like, if confirmed, I would like to work with the chain of command and very rapidly assess what things that there are that need to be fixed or addressed, and I'd like to make those recommendations and provide those assessments to the President-elect.
But you do agree that we can't keep doing the same thing that we've been doing for the past decade?
I absolutely agree with that, Senator. I absolutely agree with that.
Do I have your commitment to be relentless on this issue until we can end the scourge of sexual violence in the military?
You have my commitment.
Okay. I'd now like to move to civil-military relations. Mr. Austin, scholars rightly argue that the Secretary of Defense plays a critical role in maintaining balanced civilian-military relations by explaining the military's activities to the public. Secretary Mattis, another recently retired general who required a waiver to serve, did not embrace this role. According to Bob Woodward's book, Fear, Mattis grew so tired of being asked to appear on Sunday shows that he threatened to send Sean Spicer to Afghanistan. Mr. Austin, can you commit to following in the footsteps of your predecessors and regularly appearing on TV to explain to Americans where the administration has asked service members to risk their lives and why?
I fully understand and appreciate the role that Secretary of Defense has in communicating with the American public, Senator. And you have my commitment that I will establish a good relationship with the media and provide them the access and the information required to do their job of reporting out to the American people.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Cotton.
Congratulations, General Austin, on your nomination, and thank you for your appearance today, and especially for your 4 decades of military service. Unfortunately, I must announce that I oppose the waiver of the 7-year cooling-off period. My decision reflects not at all on you personally or your record, which I respect. Rather, I believe Congress should no longer grant such waivers at all. I supported the waiver for General Mattis with reservations 4 years ago, which I quickly came to view as a mistake, and I have since regretted. For that matter, upon further reading of the historical record, I now believe the waiver for General Marshall in 1950 was also a mistake. Under no foreseeable circumstances can I imagine supporting such a